Joining me at the podium will be Bill Thompson with the Prosecutor's Office and the two lead investigators, Brett Payne and Darren Gilbertson. Just a couple of things before we begin. We recognize that everyone has a lot of questions. We're going to try to do our best to get to as many as we possibly can. Also, keep in mind that there are still some things that we are unable to talk about because of either privacy interests for the victims and their families and/or they are under seal currently in the court. So if those items do come up, then that will certainly be the answer that you will receive. And to keep this sort of orderly, I will try to be the one to point out who's got their hands up. Right there.
Chief Dollinger,
yes.
With Crime 2 in Spokane. What more can you tell us about the release documents that the police department is working on putting online, and what can you expect from that?
Certainly. As we put out in that press release, I hope everybody can understand the immense amount of information that's in this investigation is going to take a lot of time to prepare. It has to be gone through legally to be redacted or figured out whether or not it can actually be released. So I did get word today. It sounds like our website will be going live hopefully this afternoon. There should be another press release coming out in the next few hours to show that website so that people can start accessing that. Initially, what is going to be on there, and certainly this is just for the Moscow Police Department because we're only the holders of our records, but it will be all of our police reports from this investigation. So just the documents there. They'll be redacted, ready to go, again, free of charge for the public. We want to be as transparent as we possibly can, so we wanted to get those out to everyone.
Chief, from the very beginning, your department was saying this was a targeted attack. Can you now say who was the target and what's your evidence to show that?
I'll turn that question over to the investigators to answer that one.
Well, I think Darren and I have, the evidence suggested that there was a reason that this particular house was chosen. What that reason is, we don't know. We don't know who the target was, and we're not going to speculate on that up here today. But we can tell you that for whatever reason, Mr. Kohberger chose that residence. Perhaps it's the location, layout, we don't know. But that's, to the best of my knowledge, that's what that statement likely led to.
During the Haley got there page 2, there was a social media account that surfaced that has long had speculation that it was Bryan Kohberger. Can you talk at all about the Papa Roger potential connection, if any?
Right. There was no connection. There wasn't at all. We looked into every bit of it. We took a deep dive into it. We researched it. We utilized. It was not. It was not. Thank you. We can cut that off.
Is it possible that there was a second murder weapon used, not just the knife?
Is it possible? All the evidence shows and tells us that he used a knife, a K-bar knife, and that's a weapon we believe was used to commit all the murders.
Here?
It sounded like the Gonzalez family said that there was a second weapon that was used on Haley Gonzalez. Can you confirm or deny that?
Out of respect for the families, that's something that you'll have to get from them. If they wish to share that with you, it'd probably be through them, not through us.
And one more question. You said that it seemed like he chose that house. There's no clues as to why he chose that house?
You know, after working in Moscow for several years as Chief Dollinger, that area is frequented by many, many people at all hours of the night when college is in session. So what Darren and I have surmised is that perhaps it's the old hiding in plain sight. There's lots of people around, there's lots of vehicles around at all hours. It's not isolated where you'd be noticed, so that's where that comment comes from.
It does, and though it doesn't make sense, and it's if you were in that neighborhood at all, it's a very complicated neighborhood. It's very closed in, but at the same time, there's everything from college kids to adults that live there, people that have full-time jobs, part-time jobs, so any one of us could come and go and fit in there. So,
Right here.
DA Thompson, during the plea hearing and then again today, it seemed like your voice quivered a bit when you were either putting up photographs or mentioning the victims' names. I'm just wondering about the emotional toll, and I have one other question.
Yeah, you're right. My voice was quivering. Y'all were in there. There was a lot of powerful emotion. The losses are almost indescribable. And maybe my filters aren't as good as they might have been 45 years ago when I started in this business. But I think you also saw that even Judge Hippler was affected and impacted by this. There is no easy way to remain stiff-lipped and dry-eyed through this kind of tragedy. There just simply isn't.
I'm sure you're not aware of this yet, but there was a photograph where they zoomed in on a picture that Bryan Kohberger had on the defense counsel table. It was an image of a black heart. I don't know if you heard this or you've seen the image. Hearing this, your thoughts?
First I've heard of it. There is something I need to say though real quick. This is the product of, I'm sure I'm getting old in my failed memory, but there's one other person I need to recognize, and this is very important to us because this was a key person that was going to take us through trial, and that's Josh Hurwitz, the former United States Attorney for the District of Idaho who left office and voluntarily joined our office as a special deputy to help us. My apologies for the oversight as I wasn't reading my notes correctly, but thank you for that little interlude. Chief? Yes.
I guess my question is for Mr. Thompson, since you're still up there, incidentally, he was following crime. You said that, it was your decision to accept this plea agreement. It brings finality, people die in prison, but Corporal Payne just said they don't know who the target was and why he targeted this house. Was there a reason why, as part of the agreement, you didn't require Taylor to have her client sit down with you all and to answer some of these questions?
I think that Judge Hippler addressed that today very, very well. Of course, Judge Hippler addresses everything very well, we found. The law does not give the court or us the power to require a specific factual allocution. And just let me finish. And we recognize that. We recognize that we could have said, well, in order for us to move forward, we want a factual allocution. But I have to be perfectly candid. I don't believe that there's anything that would come out of his mouth that would be the truth. I don't believe that there's anything that would come out of his mouth that would be anything other than self-serving. And I don't believe there's anything that would come out of his mouth that would not further victimize the families. And so that just simply wasn't a factor. We made our decision based on our assessment of law and the facts. We made our decision based on being able to obtain accountability and certainty, not just for the victims' families, but for the communities and for the state. And that's where our obligations go. And in the end, in the old Harry Truman thing, the buck stops on my desk. Well, that's what I got when I was elected prosecutor 33 years ago. I never dreamed it would involve something like this. But we don't shirk our responsibilities just because it got big and nasty.
Thank you. Corporal Payne and Lieutenant Gilbertson, first of all, I want to say to you, Corporal Payne, that the chief of family told me that you called them every night during that nearly 7-week manhunt, even though you didn't have to. And I just think that goes to show the personal care you put into this. So, that being said, I'm curious as to where you think or believe the murder weapon is, where you think or believe the clothes Kohberger was wearing that night are, and how do you think he avoided forensics at the scene?
Well, I can just tell you, and forgive us if we go back and forth, it's just kind of how we roll. But there is no evidence that we found that would lead us to any specific, even general location as to where the murder weapon or the clothes have been. And we searched. I mean, the FBI, again, to their credit, we had folks doing soil samples and so all sorts of things to try to come up with somewhere to start searching for these things, and we just never found it. As far as the forensics piece, I'll let Darren speak to
Yeah,
that.
and on the weapon, it wasn't a lack of trying. Everywhere that we had evidence of where he went, based upon phone records, based upon the evidence that we had gathered, we searched that. We went there. We did searches on the ground, in the water. We did searches. We sent soil samples to try to figure out maybe where a shovel had been used. So we searched everywhere that we possibly could, but the reality is we're looking for a singular small, it's not that small, but K-bar knife, and that's it. So it's endless of where it could have been, and we just were not able to find it. So.
What about the clothes and his ability to avoid forensics at the scene, in a murder scene where we now know Kay Gonzalez was stabbed 34 times? times and that another victim is stabbed more than that.
Right. So the reality is that somebody can carry this out and still not get covered in blood. That's the reality of it, and this does happen, and there's plenty of studies of that. And we've had some of the world's experts that we've asked those same questions, because we've struggled with that. Why do we not find more here and there? And the reality was, if somebody has the training, if somebody has thought about it, if somebody wears the right type of clothing, that could be the outcome, and that's what we were left with.
Good. Over here.
Jean Casares of CNN. Mr. Thompson, did you do psychological testing on Bryan Kohberger? Did that weigh into your decision to have a plea deal? And stabbings, multiple stabbings are very personal. How did you assess that mode of murder?
I can tell you that psychological testing was done with Mr. Kohberger. The results of that do not rise to a defense to his conduct under Idaho law. The results of the various testing, most of it done by the defense or on behalf of the defense, is also sealed by court order. So I can't speak to any specifics, but I can tell you, yes, psychological testing was done. I can also tell you that no, psychological testing or any potential psychological condition of Mr. Kohberger, that did not play a role in our decision.
Bill, does it have any bearing on where he will be placed or housed?
Where Mr. Kohberger, where the defendant is going to be housed, is going to be up to the Idaho Department of Correction. And that could very well change over time. And the reality is we will know about it after it happens.
Over here.
Did you monitor Mr. Kohberger's communications while he was incarcerated? And did he say anything that was helpful or gave you any insight as to why he did this?
Yeah, we did monitor it, both while he was housed in Latah County and then once he was moved down to Ada County. We have hundreds, thousands of hours of monitoring that was done, but there was nothing of evidentiary value that was gained from any of it.
Will you be releasing those conversations?
That's a good question.
It's my understanding that the jail will not be releasing things that involve personal conversations with third parties. That ultimately would be a decision because the recordings are in possession of the two correctional facilities or detention facilities. But I'm pretty certain the Latah County Sheriff's Office policy does not allow for that, and I would guess Ada County is similar. You can ask them.
Back here.
Thank you. Greg Fisher with CBS News 48 Hours. Was there any evidence that Kohberger was following the social media of any of the victims?
So, trust us, we wanted that to be the case. We've looked for a link and we have not found one. Not one.
Yeah, through the entire investigation, I think that's something that we need, that you want, is to help to understand this and say, well, what's the connection? What was the link? And so we had every resource possible, and we worked that tirelessly, both from everything from his side, but all the victims and all the members of the House from their side. So we have never, to this date, found a single connection between him and any of the 4 victims or the 2 surviving roommates.
Michael Ruiz from Fox News Digital. My question is for the investigators. You guys are going through this case. You got a lot of evidence about his background, his education, his training. You know, you said earlier you couldn't identify a reason the house was targeted. Do you have a motive for this?
We don't.
No.
Yes.
Lauren Patterson, Northwest Public Broadcasting. This question's for Anthony Dallinger, actually. I remember
Sure.
when Anthony was a beat cop, assigned to talk to us at the very beginning, and all of this happened, and now you're running the show. So I wanted to ask, as a community member, has this case shaped and changed how you're policing in Moscow?
It's changed everyone involved. How could it not? You know, it was a devastating tragedy to our community, and our police department is a part of that community, and it was very difficult for us as well. So, you know, this is just one of those things that will not define us, but it is certainly a part of our history that we will never forget. Yes.
Rebecca Boone, Associated Press. The perhaps unprecedented level of interest in a court case like this in Idaho was matched by an extremely high level of secrecy within the case. The Gonzalez family has said that they're desperate for answers officers about what happened to their daughter. Do you anticipate most of the court documents being unsealed, or are there things that you will specifically request remain sealed?
As far as the court documents, Judge Hippler has told us that he is going to work with the attorneys to go through every sealed document. Many, probably most of the documents were sealed for the purpose of protecting against tainting a jury pool. And those documents I would expect would become unsealed. Requests for discovery, various things like that. There are also documents in there that contain very personal, private information regarding victims and families. I expect those likely will not be released under Idaho's protections against what the law calls unwarranted invasions of personal privacy. I realize that can be frustrating for folks who want to be able to explore this thoroughly, but we have to balance, and the law balances, the privacy of the people who have suffered, including the victims who are dead, with giving the public as much information as we responsibly can.
Alex Duggan, spokesman review. I'm just wondering, did the lack of knowing the reason or the motive concern you when prepping for trial? Because juries tend to want to explore the motive or reason for a crime. And also, how do you as investigators and attorneys grapple with that? Because if you can't rationalize something irrational, then how do you continue knowing that maybe you won't get an answer?
Well, I'll tell you from an investigator standpoint, we already know and realize we often don't get to know that. We want it. We all do. We naturally want that. But the reality is it's not something that we have to have or that we get. And the reality also is that oftentimes those very things that you're asking about, they're only known to one person. And it's the person that commits those crimes. And I think that's probably what we have here.
And I would add that going through this whole investigation, I'd probably say it's easier than it was for Bill's offices. We were focused on a task. We had a task to do, and it was discovering evidence and interviewing folks and that sort of thing. So the motive necessarily doesn't play a part in that, right? Obviously it can, but we were just focused on getting the job done in the correct way as best we could. So.
And from the prosecutor's point of view, yeah, certainly lack of a clear motive is something that we think about and consider as we're preparing for trial, because we're going to have a jury of 12, ordinary, honest citizens there who are wanting to figure this thing out. But we also, and I've also found that juries tend to follow the law. And even jurors who come in with strong feelings, they tend to follow the law that the judge gives. And there is no element of motive in Idaho law for murder. And so we set that aside as something that we were going to dwell on, whether there was clear proof of a specific motive, because we knew it wasn't legally required. And practically speaking, we knew it wasn't something that we possessed that we could give to the jury without speculating. And I'm sure as heck not going to stand in front of a bunch of 12 jurors and start speculating. We're going to give them the evidence. And the evidence in this case, what you heard at the time of his guilty plea back on the 2nd, that evidence was compelling, and it showed his guilt without having to worry about motive in a human sense. Thank you for the question.
Okay. In the back?
Did he say anything when he was arrested?
Yeah, so Brett, myself, and members of the FBI, we traveled back to Pennsylvania. We were there, and I know they hit on it earlier, but I'd be remiss without talking about the cooperation and the support that we had from them was absolutely incredible. From the time that we got on the ground with the Pennsylvania State Police and with the FBI back there, it was unbelievable. Anything that we needed, they were there to facilitate it. So we helped to shape what that looked like, what the arrest looked like, what took place once they hit the house on the search warrant and he was taken into custody. Brett and I were at another location, a barracks of the Pennsylvania State Police, and then he was brought to us and we conducted an interview with him that night there in Pennsylvania. So.
Can you talk about what he said?
So we went into this interview, we used a lot of influence and guidance from the FBI and their behavioral analysis unit. They helped us a ton in framing our our interview strategy rather. When we spoke to Mr. Kohberger, we kept it pretty surface level to begin with, the idea being get him to speak and keep him speaking. It was pretty surface level, and then when we tried to get into things a bit more detail, he decided to end the interview. So that's pretty much
As soon
all
as we
got.
tried to walk into the purpose of why we're there, which obviously he knows, we're detectives from Idaho, so that's when we really started to shut down, and then he just shut it down. So we
What was his demeanor?
Calm, relaxed.
say very similar to what you
Yeah.
see and whenever you see him in court.
Okay, next question? Yes, sir?
Yeah, Mike Baker from the New York Times. I'm wondering if you can talk about Mr. Kohberger's family, whether you got much cooperation, tips, input from them along the way.
The only thing I'm really able to talk about is that we didn't get any tips or any evidentiary items from the family. So, yeah. Anything to add to that?
No, no.
Yes.
Just wondering if you ever had any idea of what made Mr. Kohberger take the plea deal at the end?
No.
Can I ask a follow-up? I know there were
That was a short answer. You probably have time for a short follow-up.
Can I also ask a follow-up to the investigators? I know there's some reports that there was Kohberger was a piracy proof container out of the house. Did you ever determine what that was?
No, and the belief was in the one of the surviving roommates in her statement, and that's out there, was that she observed something in his hand when she saw him, but we don't know what it was.
You had an expert who was going to testify about him cleaning something off of his work computer, some software experts. Was there any evidence that he had tried to wipe anything from his phone, software-wise? The bar cards, I believe, is very.
Yeah, and so this kind of goes into the connection to the victims as well. That's a similar question. We had the world's foremost experts on this look into it, and there was evidence that he had used software to wipe many of his devices relatively effectively, so there wasn't much evidence obtained after that.
Including, I think he had two, did he have two cell phones, or was it just the one cell phone?
I think he had one active phone,
Yeah.
but I don't remember, so
I don't
don't quote me
remember
if he had more at his home or office or somewhere else.
Just the work computer that he had wiped?
Yeah, he regularly used software to try to wipe, clear things off. He used VPN on his devices also.
Okay, back here.
Kevin Fixer with the Idaho Statesman. I'm hoping you can walk us through the decision to hand off the DNA process on the knife sheet over to Offram Labs, who's contracted by ISP, and then ultimately the FBI takes over that IGG process. And then Prosecutor Thompson, I'm curious if you had concerns about constitutional rights issues based on how the FBI conducted themselves in that part.
I'll start, and I'll just speak briefly to, when we were notified that we had a DNA from the knife sheath, and it was a single source male DNA, touch DNA, then we knew that we had capabilities to take that further. So you're correct, the Idaho State Police has a contract with Offram Laboratories in Texas. So we flew that over there, and they started the process of working that in what was the beginning of the IGG process. And at some point during it, we were working with the FBI, which we did closely throughout the entire case and every aspect of it. We talked and met with them, and they had further resources and some capabilities that we thought may get us somewhere quicker. And so we made the decision to then shift that to the FBI and continue that process there.
And as to your question about legal concerns, my simple answer is no. I didn't have legal concerns about how the FBI conducted their IGG investigation. I know that was the subject of lengthy, detailed, painfully detailed motions and briefing, and Mr. Nye rose to the occasion and was able to address all of that. But in the end, it's simply no different than sending somebody undercover into any place to gather information. And I was not concerned about the legality of it. And the judge came through and made the right decision that there was no violation of the defendant's rights or anybody else's rights.
Had he not left the knife sheath behind, would you have been able to track him down?
We've talked about this ad nauseum, and the answer is yes. Through the car, most likely. We had some amazing people going truly line by line over tens of thousands of white Hyundai Elantras. So we believe we would have got to it through that avenue. The time frame for that is uncertain. It could have been a week later, could have been 2 months later. We just don't know. We would have found him. We would have found him.
There's a lot of questions in regards to that initial window. Brett and I made the decision on what that window was, even though the experts were saying there may be more years that match it, but the simple numbers that we began to look at were astronomical, of thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of these vehicles. So we chose to try to narrow it and start smaller, and then as we had to, we were going to open that up. But we both believe we would have gotten him through the car eventually. Yes.
Question for Mr. Thompson. Amanda Rowley with Correct You. It appears that the plea deal, it felt a bit rushed. So the question is, why did it happen so quickly, considering some of the families were against it? And also, the Mogan family at the plea hearing mentioned saying that this is the best possible outcome. I'm just wondering, do you agree with that, or would you like to see a different outcome?
Well, I think we agree with the Mogan family. Our decision was that this is the best possible outcome, all things considered, and factoring into that the defendant was prepared to plead guilty as charged. Now, if that hadn't been a factor, we'd be picking a jury for trial starting right now, or starting this week. What was the first part?
Why was this such a quick? It felt rushed. So why did this happen so quickly with the family?
No, I hear you. The process moved quickly. There was no doubt about it. And like I outlined for the court earlier today, things changed dynamically the week following the June 18th hearings on the defense motion for a continuance and the alternate perpetrator motion, where Judge Hippler made it very clear that the defense was not going to prevail on either of those. And so the reality of trial was there, and there was nothing else in its way. We were continuing to prepare for trial. We had been doing that for months, and as I mentioned, that's me bringing Mr. Hurwitz in to help us because the Attorney General's office was not able with the manpower to help us all the way through trial. We were ready to go. When we were approached by the defense about the possibility of a plea, our first question was, is your client prepared to plead guilty? And it took them a little while to give us that answer. In the meantime, we reached out to the families, and we talked to the families, and we solicited their input, and we considered that in making our decision. The fact of the matter is, and I think Judge Hippler commented on this back on July 2nd when we were in court, is that the logistics of the upcoming trial, with 10,000 prospective jurors being summoned in, the court staff making arrangements and preparing to process that part of the case, dictated that if the case was going to resolve, it needed to resolve quickly. And so that kind of drove the pace over that weekend, the last weekend of June. At the end of the weekend, when we understood from the defense that the defendant was prepared to plead guilty, the court was notified the next morning, and the court wanted to move quickly to get a plea done on the record if it was going to be done, and if it wasn't, so we were not interrupted in our trial preparations.
The trial logistics were the main concern, just as Judge Hippler had said prior, right, with the jury as a factor.
Yeah, the practical aspect is that the trial machine was running, and if it was going to be interrupted, that had to be known as soon as possible. I think that's the fairest explanation.
Okay, question here.
Michelle Beatty from 48 Hours. I just had a question about when you were looking into Kohberger's past. Was there any early sign of trouble, or what did his background look like?
Well, we can't go into his younger years. I believe that's actually still under seal, and correct me if I'm wrong. But what I can tell you is the things we do know about him was that his education led him down a path that was very much focused on forensics, crime scenes, that sort of thing. So that was really what we focused on in his background, was what led him down this path. How may he have prepared for this? And I think that was a big component of that, was just his schooling and his choice of potential future profession, so.
And just so there's no speculation here by what Detective Payne just said, documents under seal involving Mr. Kohberger's background, they may or may not be released down the road. I can tell you that there is no evidence of any criminal history of any significant nature. There was no evidence of a history of violence. There was no evidence of a history of a factual predisposition to do the crimes that he committed here. So if there are any concerns among your listeners or readers that somehow he was a serial killer in waiting with all of these prior actions, we are not aware of any behaviors like that that preceded what happened here in Idaho.
We'll take this question here, and then we're going to have two more after that to finish up.
Regarding the CBS's questions for Mr. Thompson. Mr. Thompson, you talked about the deal with the victim's families before the plea deal was reached, including the Gonzalez's. Have you spoken to the Gonzalez's afterward about their displeasure with this? And if so, what has that conversation been like?
We have spoken with families afterwards, and I can tell you that families that did not agree with our decision have made that very clear to us. And I don't expect anything different. I respect, and we respect, that everyone is going to grieve differently, even within family units. And everyone is going to look at the case and possible resolutions from their own light, and they are entitled to that as victims. I'm not going to pretend that everybody was just fine with our decision, because there were families and family members who were not. And we accept that, we recognize that. It's just a fact of life.
Two more questions? Have we called on you yet?
It was stated earlier that the target is unknown. However, it's been speculated that the convicted may have encountered Maddie while she was serving at the Mag Creek restaurant due to the vegan menu options. When his digital data was analyzed, were there any location pins or any information there that could have connected him to where Maddie worked?
No, there wasn't. Like I said earlier, we wanted that. We looked for it in every possible way, digitally, financially, physical location, anything you could think of, anything that we thought, where is the connection, where's the overlap, and we searched tirelessly and never found it.
So he never was at that restaurant?
I can't say that he was never there at all, but we never found any evidence at all from interviewing everybody that we possibly could, talking to every person that would have that information to be able to show that he was there or that there was a connection through the restaurant.
Okay, last question here.
Okay, just two follow-ups to earlier questions, if that's okay, so I can make sure we're understanding everybody correctly. First of all, Mike's question about the family. You said that you didn't get any evidence from the family. Was there any hindrance of the investigation from the family? And was there any specific evidence you were hoping to get?
Are you talking about his family, Kohberger's?
Yes.
There was not any hindrance, anything, nothing that impacted us carrying out the investigation.
Great, thank you. And then the second follow-up, when you mentioned, like, obviously he followed this line of interest in his studies, did anything in your investigation indicate that that was chosen as part of a planning process as opposed to just an area of interest?
There was nothing aside from, we have some of his coursework where he did, a crime scene recreation, that sort of thing, but it was all part of his studies. So I don't think that any of us attributed that to a planning process per se. Certainly it was a learning process, but whether or not it was a planning process ahead of what he did, we'll probably never know that.
Yeah, and I would say we didn't find anything that would be any different than a student similar, a different student in the PhD program.
Gotcha, so then I'm understanding that the planning process, that your investigation turned up, if it was part of the plan, was maybe that purchase of the K-Bar knife on Amazon would have been the first, I guess, step toward.
Yeah.
Did he plan it? Did he buy it with the purpose of that? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
And we don't
have
know.
anything to show or prove that he did that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. That concludes our Q&A section today. Hopefully tried to get as many of you folks' questions answered as possible. I'm sure you're going to have further questions, and certainly the question was already brought up about public records requests. Just keep in mind that if you're looking for those in the future, you will need to go to each individual agency or entity that has the keepers of those records. So just to reiterate, the website that the City of Moscow is going to be putting up, hopefully today, that will only be Moscow Police Department records, and those will be our police reports. So we understand that this case has captured the attention of literally the world, and today's news conference was not held to relive the tragedy, but to honor those lives that were lost, to acknowledge the conclusion of this legal process, and to reinforce our wavering commitment to justice, a commitment we share with you. I want to take a moment to thank the members of the media here today. We understand that you do have a vital role in helping the public comprehend the intricacies of this case, and your continued professionalism in covering this emotionally charged and complex case is appreciated. No additional comments from law enforcement will be made today, and if you have further questions, please feel free to submit those through the agency's public information officers. Thank you very much.